The morning fog clung to Raft Debden like a wet wool blanket, typical for Essex in late January 1943. Flight Lieutenant James Harper stood outside the dispersal hut, nursing a mug of bitter tea that had gone cold an hour ago. Around him, the silhouettes of Supermarine Spitfires emerged from the mist like gray ghosts, their elliptical wings beaded with moisture. Harper was 27, but felt 50. 3 years of war had etched lines around his pale blue eyes that no amount of sleep could erase. He'd flown hurricanes during the desperate summer of 1940, when Britain stood alone against the Luftwaffe. He'd survived when better men hadn't. The names of the dead were carved into his memory deeper than any monument. Patterson, shot down over the Thames estuary. Mackenzie, never returned from a sweep over Calais. Young Bradshaw, only 19, who'd pancaked into the channel and drowned before rescue could reach him. Now Harper commanded Blue Section of No. 633 Squadron, flying the beloved Spitfire Mark V. She was a beautiful aircraft, responsive as a thoroughbred, deadly in the right hands. Harper knew her limitations as intimately as he knew his own. Range, approximately 470 miles. Service ceiling, roughly 36,000 feet. Speed, around 370 miles per hour in level flight. Enough to defend Britain, to escort bombers partway across the channel, to duel with Messerschmitt Bf-109s on relatively equal terms. But not enough to reach Berlin. Not enough to protect the American flying fortresses on their daylight raids deep into the Reich. Not enough to end this bloody war. "Harper!" The shout came from squadron leader William Thornton, striding across the damp grass with his characteristic energy. Despite the early hour, Thornton looked parade ground perfect, his uniform pressed, his mustache trimmed with military precision. "Group captain wants all flight commanders in the briefing room. 20 minutes. Harper drained the cold tea and grimaced. "What's the flap, sir?" "New kites arriving today. American." Thornton's expression suggested he'd just announced a delivery of live Vipers. Airacobras? Harper had heard stories about the P-39, none of them good. The Americans loved the bloody things, but RAF pilots who'd flown them in the Mediterranean theater called them death traps with the engine behind the cockpit. Negative. Something called a Mustang. P-51. Thornton shrugged. Probably another Yankee experiment. You know how they are. All chrome and horsepower, no finesse. Harper suppressed a smile. The British aviation establishment harbored a particular snobbery about aircraft design. Spitfires and Hurricanes were products of centuries of British engineering tradition, elegant solutions to aerodynamic problems. American aircraft, by contrast, were often viewed as crude, brute force affairs, fast in a straight line perhaps, but lacking the handling characteristics that made a proper fighting machine. 20 minutes later, Harper sat in the briefing room alongside the other flight commanders. The air smelled of damp wool, cigarette smoke, and the peculiar mustiness that infested every RAF building. On the wall, a map of occupied Europe bristled with colored pins marking known Luftwaffe airfields, flak concentrations, and fighter zones. Red pins clustered around the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heart of the Nazi war machine, protected by hundreds of anti-aircraft guns and fighter squadrons. Group Captain Edward Mallory entered, followed by a tall American officer wearing the uniform of the United States Army Air Forces. The American was young, perhaps 30, with the easy confidence Harper had noticed in all the Yanks who'd flooded into Britain since Pearl Harbor. His leather jacket bore the insignia of the 8th Air Force, and his chest displayed ribbons Harper didn't recognize. "Gentlemen," Mallory's voice cut through the murmur of conversation. "This is Major Robert Caldwell, liaison officer from the 8th Air Force. He's here regarding the new aircraft being assigned to this station." "Major?" Caldwell stepped forward with a slight smile. "Good morning. I know you're all busy men, so I'll keep this brief. As of today, your squadron is being re-equipped with the North American P-51 Mustang. The first batch arrived at the docks yesterday. They'll be here this afternoon." A ripple of reaction ran through the room. Flight Lieutenant Davies, who commanded A Flight, spoke up. Sir, with respect, we're quite happy with our Spitfires. They're proven aircraft. We know their capabilities. I understand, Lieutenant. Caldwell's smile didn't waver. But the Spitfire has operational limitations, range being the primary one. The Mustang can fly missions your current aircraft simply cannot accomplish. Such as? That was Squadron Leader Thornton, skepticism dripping from every syllable. Caldwell walked to the map and placed his finger on Berlin, 600 miles deep into enemy territory. Such as escorting heavy bombers all the way to targets like this and back again. The Mustang has a combat radius of approximately 750 miles with drop tanks. That's nearly double what your Spitfire can manage. The silence that followed was profound. Harper exchanged glances with Davies. 750 miles? That was impossible. No single-engine fighter had that kind of range. The physics simply didn't allow it. Forgive me, Major, Harper said carefully, but those figures seem optimistic. Even our long-range Spitfire variants struggle to reach 400 miles. I'm not quoting theoretical numbers, Lieutenant. These are proven performance specifications. The Mustang carries 184 gallons of internal fuel plus two 75-gallon drop tanks. The Packard Merlin engine, same power plant as your Spitfire incidentally, built under license, gives excellent fuel efficiency at cruise settings. Packard Merlin. That caught Harper's attention. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine was the heart of the Spitfire, a superb piece of engineering. If the Americans had married that engine to an airframe designed for range... What about performance? Davies asked. Speed, climb rate, maneuverability? Caldwell consulted a clipboard. Maximum speed approximately 440 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Service ceiling over 41,000 feet. Rate of climb approximately 3,200 feet per minute at sea level. Armament, 6 Browning 50 caliber machine guns with 400 rounds per gun. The numbers were impressive, almost unbelievably so. The Spitfire Mark V could manage about 370 miles per hour, climbed at around 2,900 feet per minute, and topped out around 36,000 feet. If Caldwell's figures were accurate, the Mustang outperformed the beloved Spit in nearly every category except perhaps turn radius. We'll believe it when we see it, Thornton muttered, loud enough to be heard. Caldwell's smile finally showed some strain. Gentlemen, I understand your skepticism. The RAF has been fighting this war since September of 1939. You've earned the right to doubt. But these aircraft will change how we fight. They'll allow us to take the war to Germany in ways that haven't been possible before. I'm asking you to keep an open mind. Group Captain Mallory stepped forward. Right. The Mustangs arrive this afternoon. We'll conduct conversion training starting tomorrow. Major Caldwell will be coordinating with our training section. Squadron Leader Thornton, I want your best pilots checking out first. Flight Lieutenant Harper, you'll be among the first group. Harper nodded, his mind already racing. If even half of what Caldwell claimed was true, these American aircraft could indeed change everything. The Luftwaffe had enjoyed near sanctuary in the heart of Germany, beyond the range of British fighters. RAF Bomber Command's night raids inflicted damage but suffered terrible losses. The Americans' daylight precision bombing campaign was bleeding the 8th Air Force white because their bombers flew unescorted into Hornets' nest of German fighters. But if fighters could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back... The briefing broke up with the usual scraping of chairs and murmured conversations. Harper lingered, approaching Major Caldwell as the others filed out. Major, a question, if I may? Of course, Lieutenant. You mentioned the Merlin engine. The early Mustangs we evaluated in 1941 had Allison engines and were less impressive. What changed? Caldwell's expression brightened with genuine enthusiasm. You've done your homework. Yeah, the early Mustang 1 with the Allison was a great low-altitude aircraft, but struggled above 15,000 feet. didn't have the supercharger to compete at altitude. Someone, and there's debate about who exactly, had the bright idea to marry the Mustang airframe with the British Merlin engine. The two-stage, two-speed supercharger gave it the high-altitude performance it needed. North American made the modifications, Packard started building Merlins under license in the States, and voila, the P-51B model you're getting. Clever, Harper admitted, taking the best of both designs. That's the idea. Look, Lieutenant. Caldwell paused, choosing his words carefully. I know there's friction between RAF and USAAF pilots sometimes. The whole, we've been fighting while you were sitting it out thing. And that's fair. But this aircraft, it's a genuine game changer. I've flown it. It's the real deal. Give it a fair shake, yeah? Harper extended his hand. You have my word, Major. If she flies as advertised, you'll hear no complaints from me. They shook, and Harper headed back to the dispersal hut. The fog was finally burning off, revealing a pale winter sun. Across the airfield, ground crew were already preparing the hard stands for new arrivals, painting fresh recognition markings on the tarmac. Inside the hut, Harper found his section pilots gathered around the stove. Pilot Officer Tommy Wright, 22, ginger-haired and perpetually cheerful despite having been shot down twice. Flight Sergeant Peter Donaldson, a Scot from Edinburgh with hands like shovels and the best deflection shooting Harper had ever seen. And Sergeant Alex Morrison, the baby of the section at 19, who'd lied about his age to join up and somehow survived his first 10 combat missions through a combination of luck and natural flying ability. Skipper, Wright said as Harper entered, what's the word? Are we really giving up our Spits for Yankee kites? Harper poured himself fresh tea from the pot on the stove. Seems that way, Tommy. Orders from Group. We start conversion training tomorrow. Bloody hell. Donaldson's Scots accent thickened with displeasure. I've 600 hours on Spitfires. Now I'm supposed to learn some American contraption? Peter, you learn to fly Hurricanes, then Spits. You'll learn this too. Harper sat down, cradling the warm mug. Besides, the performance figures are impressive. Might be worth the trouble. Morrison, who'd been quietly reading a battered copy of Picture Post, looked up. Sir, my cousin's with ground crew at Bovingdon. He saw some Mustangs there last month. Said they looked fast. Said the American pilots couldn't stop raving about them. American pilots rave about everything, Wright said with a grin. They think spam's haute cuisine. The afternoon brought low clouds and intermittent rain, typical English weather that Germans called Churchill weather, too poor for Luftwaffe raids. Harper was reviewing combat reports in his quarters when the distant rumble of heavy lorries reached his ears. He grabbed his service cap and headed to the flight line. A convoy of American Army trucks was rolling through the main gate, each one hauling a massive crate stenciled with fragile aircraft components and stars and stripes markings. Behind them came low loaders carrying aircraft wings wrapped in protective canvas. Ground crew swarmed around the vehicles, directed by harried-looking sergeants with clipboards. Harper spotted Flight Sergeant Charlie Matthews, the senior engineering NCO, supervising the unloading of the first crate. Matthews was 53, a veteran of the Great War who'd maintained aircraft since the days of wood and canvas biplanes. What do you make of them, Flight? Harper asked. Matthews spat tobacco juice into the grass. Too soon to tell, sir, but I'll say this. The manufacturing quality looks first-rate. American mass production. Everything standardized, interchangeable parts. Very different from our methods. A crane was lifting a fuselage from its crate, revealing sleek lines quite unlike the Spitfire's curves. The Mustang had a squared-off canopy, a long nose housing the Merlin engine, and a distinctive belly scoop for the radiator. The overall impression was of purposeful functionality rather than elegant beauty. She's not much to look at, Matthews continued, but neither's a lorry, and lorries do their job. We'll see if these do theirs. By nightfall, 3 complete Mustangs sat in the hangar, surrounded by tools and ground crew working under harsh electric lights. Harper stood in the hangar doorway, studying the nearest aircraft. Someone had already painted RAF roundels over the American stars, but the aircraft still looked foreign, unmistakably American in its design philosophy. Major Caldwell appeared at his elbow. "What do you think, Lieutenant?" "I think," Harper said slowly, "that she looks like she means business. No frills, no nonsense." "That's North American aviation for you. They designed her to a specification, met every requirement, and didn't waste time making her pretty." Caldwell patted the fuselage fondly. "But when you're at 25,000 feet over Germany, with BF 109s on your tail, pretty doesn't matter. Performance matters." "Tomorrow we find out if the performance matches the promises." "Tomorrow," Caldwell agreed. "Get some rest, Lieutenant. You're going to want to be sharp for your first flight." That night, Harper lay in his narrow bed in the officers' quarters, unable to sleep. Through the window, he could see the dark shapes of the new Mustangs on the flight line, mysterious and full of potential. In 3 years of war, he'd learned to distrust enthusiasm and promises. He'd seen too many wonder weapons that failed to deliver, too many grand strategies that collapsed under contact with reality. But something about Major Caldwell's quiet confidence, about those performance specifications, nagged at him. What if the Americans had actually done it? What if they'd built a fighter that could genuinely change the air war? Tomorrow would bring answers. Tomorrow, he'd climb into that alien cockpit and find out if American engineering could back up American confidence. Harper finally drifted off to sleep as dawn approached, dreaming of silver wings cutting through clouds at impossible altitudes, flying toward targets that had always been beyond reach. The war was about to change. He could feel it. Dawn broke cold and clear over RAF Debden, the kind of crystalline winter morning that made combat flying both exhilarating and deadly. Harper stood on the flight line at 0700 hours, watching his breath condense in the frigid air. Before him sat Mustang A G473, freshly painted in standard RAF Dayfighter camouflage, dark green and ocean gray upper surfaces, medium sea gray underneath. The RAF roundels looked oddly out of place on the American airframe. Major Caldwell approached with another American officer, a captain with a weathered face and the relaxed gait of a seasoned pilot. "Lieutenant Harper, this is Captain Jake Summers. He's been flying Mustangs since September of '42. He'll walk you through the checkout." Summers extended a hand, his grip firm. "Morning, Lieutenant. Ready to see what she can do?" "Looking forward to it, Captain." Harper gestured toward the aircraft. "She's certainly different from what I'm accustomed to." "Different, yeah, but you'll find the basics familiar enough. You've got stick time on Hurricanes and Spitfires. This is just another fighter, just with longer legs and a bit more punch." Summers walked to the Mustang's port side. "Let's start with the walk-around." For the next 30 minutes, Summers conducted the most thorough pre-flight briefing Harper had ever received. The American was methodical, pointing out every detail of the aircraft's construction and systems. Fuselage is all-metal, semi-monocoque construction. Laminar flow wing design. That's key to her speed and range. See how smooth the wing surfaces are? No rivets, everything flush-mounted. Reduces drag significantly. Summers ran his hand along the leading edge. Coolant radiators in that belly scoop aft of the wing. Ingenious design. It actually uses the heated air exiting the radiator to generate thrust. Almost no drag penalty. They moved to the cockpit. Summers climbed onto the wing root and indicated Harper should follow. The cockpit was roomier than the Spitfire's cramped office, with better visibility thanks to the bubble canopy, though this early model still had the framed Malcolm hood. Instrument panels pretty standard. Airspeed indicator, altimeter, rate of climb, artificial horizon, directional gyro, all where you'd expect them. Engine instruments here on the right. Manifold pressure, RPM, oil pressure and temperature, coolant temperature, fuel pressure. Summers pointed to each gauge. Main fuel tanks in the fuselage behind you, 85 gallons. Wing tanks hold another 99 gallons total. With drop tanks, you're carrying over 400 gallons total. Harper whistled softly. The Spitfire's entire internal capacity was 85 gallons. The idea of carrying nearly 5 times that much fuel seemed extravagant, almost wasteful. But if it translated to operational range... Throttle quadrants here on your left. Throttle, mixture, and prop pitch controls. The Packard Merlin V1650 gives you 1,620 horsepower at 3,000 RPM. Two-stage, two-speed supercharger. Switches automatically at around 19,000 feet. Summers tapped the throttle. She's a powerful engine, but she's also temperamental. Keep an eye on your coolant temperature, especially in climbs. If you overheat her, you'll crack the block. Understood. What about stall characteristics? Clean stall around 100 miles per hour indicated airspeed. Plenty of warning. She buffets well before she brakes. With flaps and gear down, she'll mush at about 90. No real vices. No snap rolls or spins if you treat her with respect. Summers grinned. Course, if you abuse her, she'll bite. But that's true of any fighter. They covered the electrical system, the hydraulics for the landing gear and flaps, the gun sight and armament system. The 6 Browning M2 50 caliber machine guns were mounted 3 per wing, converging at 300 yards. Each gun carried 400 rounds on a disintegrating link belt, giving roughly 34 seconds of firing time. Compared to your Spitfire's 8 Browning 303s or the cannon-armed versions, you've got fewer guns but heavier hitting power, Summers explained. The 50 cal has better range, better penetration, better ballistics. You can engage from farther out and do more damage per hit. Finally, Summers covered the flying characteristics. She's stable in all axes, more so than your Spit. Heavier on the controls, especially the ailerons at high speed. Needs two-handed flying sometimes. But once you trim her up, she'll fly hands-off for hours. Perfect for long-range escort missions. And maneuverability in combat? Summers considered the question carefully. She won't outturn a Spitfire or a 109. Physics won't allow it. She's heavier, higher wing loading. But she's got advantages. Speed, acceleration, dive performance. In a turning fight, you'll struggle. In a slashing attack, boom and zoom tactics, she's deadly. Use your speed, use your altitude advantage. Make one pass and extend away. Don't get sucked into a low-speed turning contest. Harper absorbed this. RAF fighter tactics had evolved around the turning fight, the classic dogfight of swirling aircraft trying to get on each other's tails. The Spitfire excelled at this type of combat. The Mustang represented a different philosophy. Energy management, vertical maneuvering, hit-and-run attacks. Right then, Harper said. Let's see how she flies. Summers climbed down, and Harper settled into the cockpit. A ground crewman helped him strap in. Shoulder harness, lap belt, leg restraints. The parachute pack was already in place, American-made but compatible with RAF harnesses. Harper adjusted the seat height, positioned the rudder pedals, and familiarized himself with the control layout. The startup procedure was similar to the Spitfire, but with American quirks. Battery on, fuel boost pump on, mixture rich, propeller full forward, throttle cracked open half an inch. Harper primed the engine with 4 shots, engaged the starter, and the Packard Merlin coughed to life with a deep, authoritative roar. The engine note was subtly different from the British-built Merlins Harper knew. Deeper, perhaps. Or maybe that was his imagination. The vibration through the airframe felt solid, purposeful. Harper let the engine warm up, watching the oil pressure climb and the coolant temperature rise toward operating range. Ground crew pulled the wheel chocks. Harper tested the brakes, hydraulic, responsive, and added power to taxi. The Mustang's nose was longer than the Spitfire's, blocking more of the forward view, but the visibility to the sides was excellent. He weaved slightly while taxiing to check ahead. At the runway threshold, Harper performed the final checks. Flight controls full and free movement, trim tabs set for takeoff, fuel on main tank, mixture rich, propeller full forward, radiator flap automatic, oil cooler automatic, supercharger in low gear, gyros uncaged. Major Caldwell and Captain Summers stood by the control caravan, watching. Harper caught Summers's thumbs up. Harper advanced the throttle smoothly. The Mustang accelerated with surprising eagerness, the tail coming up almost immediately. The acceleration was strong, noticeably stronger than the Spitfire. At 90 miles per hour indicated, Harper eased back on the stick and the Mustang lifted cleanly into the air. Gear up, flaps up, climb power setting, 46 inches manifold pressure, 2,800 RPM. The climb rate was impressive. Harper leveled at 5,000 feet and began exploring the aircraft's handling. The controls felt heavier than the Spitfires, but not unpleasantly so. More solid, more stable. He tried gentle banks left and right, noting the aileron response. Definitely heavier, requiring more input, but progressive and predictable. A stall series came next. Harper reduced power and raised the nose, letting the airspeed bleed off. At 105 miles per hour indicated, the buffet started, a gentle shaking through the airframe and stick. At 98, the nose dropped smoothly, with no wing drop or tendency to spin. Recovery was straightforward. Nose down, full power, airspeed building. Harper climbed to 10,000 feet and accelerated. The Mustang surged forward eagerly. At 350 miles per hour indicated, the airflow was smooth, the controls responsive. At 380, slight compressibility effects began, a heaviness in the elevator. At 400, the stick required significant force to maneuver, but the aircraft remained controllable. Harper had never flown this fast in level flight before. He tried aerobatics, loops, barrel rolls, Cuban 8s. The Mustang performed them all competently, if not with the Spitfire's light grace. This was a fighter built for a different mission profile. Where the Spitfire was a rapier, light, quick, designed for close-in dueling, the Mustang was a broadsword, heavier, more powerful, designed for devastating slashing attacks. Harper climbed to 20,000 feet, watching the altimeter unwind. The engine note changed as the supercharger shifted to high gear, a subtle transition that boosted power at altitude. He leveled at 25,000 and checked the airspeed. 430 miles per hour true airspeed. Astounding. At this altitude, the Spitfire Mark V struggled to reach 350. For 20 minutes, Harper put the Mustang through its paces. Steep turns, chandelles, split S maneuvers, high-speed dives. The aircraft never misbehaved, never surprised him with vicious characteristics. It was honest, predictable, and devastatingly effective within its design parameters. Finally, Harper descended for landing. He entered the circuit at 1,000 feet, reduced power, lowered the landing gear, hearing the satisfying thunk of the locks engaging, and extended the flaps. Turning onto final approach, Harper found the sight picture unfamiliar, but manageable. The long nose required a slight slip to see the runway threshold, but once established on the glide path, the Mustang settled into a stable descent. The touchdown was firm, but controlled. Harper let the aircraft roll out, applied the brakes gently, and taxied back to the dispersal area. As he shut down the engine, the sudden silence felt profound. He sat for a moment in the cockpit, processing the experience. Major Caldwell and Captain Summers were waiting as Harper climbed down from the wing. "Well?" Caldwell asked, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Harper removed his flying helmet and ran a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Gentlemen," he said slowly, "I owe you an apology. Every skeptical thought I had about American aircraft design was wrong. That is an extraordinary machine." Summers grinned. "Told you she was the real deal." "The performance figures you quoted? They're conservative, if anything. She's faster at altitude than you claimed? The range?" Harper shook his head. I burned perhaps 30 gallons in 40 minutes of flying, including aerobatics and high power settings. With full tanks and drop tanks, the endurance must be phenomenal. 6 hours plus, Caldwell confirmed. In combat conditions, call it 4 to 5 hours. Enough to escort bombers to Berlin and back with reserves. Harper looked back at the Mustang, seeing it with new eyes. This changes everything, doesn't it? The strategic picture, I mean. If we can escort the heavy bombers all the way to their targets, the Luftwaffe loses its sanctuary, Caldwell finished. Exactly. Right now, the 8th Air Force is getting massacred on deep penetration raids. Last October, we lost 60 B-17s in one mission to Schweinfurt. 60 bombers, 600 men. Because they had to fight their way in and out without fighter escort. With the Mustang, that changes. Squadron Leader Thornton approached, having watched Harper's flight from the ground. "Well, Harper, do the Americans' claims hold up?" "They do, sir. Better than advertised, actually. I recommend we accelerate the conversion training. The sooner we're operational on type, the better." Thornton nodded slowly. "Group Captain Mallory will want a full report, but if you're satisfied with the aircraft's capabilities, that carries weight." Over the following week, RAF Debden transformed into a hive of conversion activity. Every pilot in the squadron cycled through ground school, learning the Mustang systems and limitations. The American technical manuals were thorough, but written in an unfamiliar style, full of terms like manifold pressure instead of boost, and measurements in inches of mercury rather than pounds per square inch. Flight Sergeant Matthews and his ground crew adapted quickly to maintaining the American aircraft. The standardized parts and comprehensive technical documentation impressed the British mechanics, accustomed to the more artisanal approach of British aircraft manufacturing. "It's like the difference between a hand-built Rolls-Royce and a Ford motor car," Matthews explained to Harper. "The Rolls is beautiful, unique, a work of art. But if something breaks, you need a specialist craftsman to fix it. The Ford? Any competent mechanic can replace the part because they're all identical. For keeping aircraft flying in wartime, the American approach has advantages." Harper's section pilots completed their conversions within 3 days. Tommy Wright took to the Mustang immediately, his natural flying ability adapting to the aircraft's characteristics without difficulty. Peter Donaldson struggled initially with the heavier controls, but found that his strength, a liability in the light-touch Spitfire, served him well in the Mustang. Young Alex Morrison was simply thrilled to be flying the newest, most capable fighter in the RAF inventory. By the end of January, number 633 Squadron had 24 operational Mustangs and pilots qualified to fly them. The timing was fortuitous. The 8th Air Force was planning a major offensive for early February, sustained bombing raids against German industrial targets, weather permitting. Group Captain Mallory assembled the squadron in the briefing room on the evening of February 3rd. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Outside, ground crew were already preparing aircraft for an early morning launch. "Gentlemen," Mallory began, "tomorrow we begin operations with our new equipment. The mission is a big one. Escort duty for the 8th Air Force. Target is the Focke-Wulf factory at Oschersleben, approximately 200 miles inside Germany." A murmur ran through the assembled pilots. Oschersleben was deep in enemy territory, well beyond the range of conventional escorts. Mallory continued, 342 B-17s and B-24s will attack the target. Our job, along with several American Mustang groups, is to provide close escort from the German border to the target and back. This is exactly the mission the Mustang was designed for. He indicated the route on the wall map, traced in red grease pencil. "We'll rendezvous with the bomber stream here, over the Zuder Z. We'll maintain position with the lead combat wing, high and to the right. Expected opposition is severe. Intelligence estimates at least 200 Luftwaffe fighters defending the target area. Bf-109s, FW-190s, possibly some of the new Bf-110 twin-engine destroyers." Harper studied the map. The route penetrated deep into the heart of Germany, through some of the most heavily defended airspace in the world. Fighter bases dotted the landscape. Rhein, Quakenbrück, Wunsdorf, Magdeburg. The Luftwaffe would have time to scramble, to climb, to coordinate their attacks. Takeoff is 0700 hours, Mallory said. Weather forecast is marginal but acceptable. Cloud base around 2,000 feet over the channel, breaking to scattered clouds over Germany. Temperatures at altitude will be minus 40 Celsius or colder. Make sure your oxygen systems are functioning properly. Make sure your gun heaters are operational. And make sure you have absolute understanding of your fuel management. This is a 4-hour mission minimum. Any questions? Pilot Officer Wright raised his hand. Sir, what are the rules of engagement? Standard defensive protocols. Do not initiate attacks on enemy aircraft unless they threaten the bombers or our formation. If engaged, you are authorized to defend yourselves and pursue enemy aircraft. But remember, the mission is to protect the bombers. Your personal victory tally is secondary to bringing those bombers home safely. There were no further questions. Mallory dismissed them to prepare their kit and get what rest they could. Harper walked back to his quarters through the cold darkness, his mind already planning the mission. 4 hours of flying, most of it over enemy territory. Fighting at altitudes where a punctured oxygen line meant unconsciousness in seconds. Temperatures that could freeze exposed skin instantly. And somewhere in that cold, hostile sky, the Luftwaffe would be waiting. In his room, Harper laid out his flying gear. Silk inner gloves, leather gauntlets, silk scarf, Irvin sheepskin jacket, flying boots. He checked his Mae West life preserver, his parachute harness, his escape kit with maps, compass, concentrated rations, and local currency. He cleaned his service revolver, a Webley Mark IV, and loaded 6 rounds of .38 caliber ammunition. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. At 0300 hours, he gave up and walked to the mess for an early breakfast. Other pilots were already there, picking at eggs and bacon they couldn't really taste, drinking tea that provided warmth, if not comfort. At 0600 hours, trucks carried the pilots to the flight line. Harper's Mustang, a G473, gleamed in the pre-dawn darkness, ground crew still making final checks. Chief Matthews approached with a clipboard. She's fueled, armed, and ready, sir. All systems checked. You've got full internal fuel, 2 75-gallon drop tanks, and all 400 rounds per gun. Gun sights harmonized at 300 yards. Oxygen bottles are full. Radios on Channel C. Thank you, Chief. Harper walked around the aircraft one final time, performing his own visual inspection. Everything looked right. He climbed into the cockpit. The startup sequence was familiar now, practiced over dozens of flights. The Packard Merlin rumbled to life, coughed once, then settled into its characteristic deep growl. All around the airfield, engines were starting, the combined roar building like distant thunder. At 0650 hours, the first section began taxiing. Harper waited his turn, then followed, the Mustang's nose weaving as he maintained visual reference. The sky was lightening in the east, pale gray against black. Stars still showed overhead. At 0700 precisely, Squadron Leader Thornton's Mustang began its takeoff roll. Every 15 seconds, another aircraft followed. When Harper's turn came, he aligned on the runway centerline, checked his instruments one final time, and advanced the throttle smoothly forward. The Mustang accelerated into the dawn, lifting cleanly at 90 miles per hour. Harper retracted the gear and flaps, climbed away, and turned onto the assigned heading. All around him, Mustangs were forming up, sections joining into flights, flights into squadrons. By 0730, they were crossing the English coast at 12,000 feet, climbing steadily. The sun broke above the horizon, painting the cloud tops gold and crimson. Below, the North Sea spread out like hammered pewter. Harper checked his formation. Blue section was in good order. Right on his right wing, Donaldson and Morrison stepped up to the left. He switched his radio to the squadron frequency. Blue section, check in. Blue 2, all green. That was right, his voice tinny through the headset. Blue 3, ready. Donaldson Scott's burr was unmistakable. Blue 4, everything nominal. Morrison sounded excited, almost eager. They climbed through 15,000 feet. Harper switched to oxygen, feeling the cool flow through his mask. The temperature gauge showed minus 25 Celsius outside. At 20,000 feet, it would drop to minus 40 or below. At 0815, they crossed the Dutch coast near Texel. Below, the Zuider Zee was a gray expanse dotted with ice. Ahead, scattered clouds masked the German landscape. Harper's pulse quickened. They were over enemy territory now. Kingfish Leader, this is Fortress Blue Leader. The American voice crackled over the radio. We have you visual, 2 o'clock high. Welcome to the party. Harper spotted the bomber formation, a massive box of B-17s, their contrails streaming white against the blue. There must have been 50 aircraft in this combat wing alone, flying in tight defensive formation. More boxes were visible ahead and behind, a river of bombers stretching across the sky. Fortress Blue Leader, Kingfish Leader, roger that, moving into escort position now. The squadron climbed to 26,000 feet and took station on the bomber's right flank, 1,000 feet above and slightly ahead. From this position, they could intercept any Luftwaffe fighters attempting to attack from the sun or from above. The bombers droned eastward at 170 miles per hour, painfully slow compared to the Mustang's cruising speed of 280. Harper weaved gently, S-turning to maintain position without overrunning the formation. Time passed with agonizing slowness. Harper scanned the sky continuously, above, below, checking his 6 o'clock, quartering ahead. Nothing but blue sky and scattered clouds. But the Germans were out there. They had to be. Radar stations along the coast had tracked the bomber stream. Fighter controllers were directing interceptors into position. At 0900 hours, they crossed into Germany proper. The landscape below was a patchwork of snow-covered fields and dark forests. Small towns clustered around church steeples. Roads and rail lines formed geometric patterns across the countryside. Kingfish Flight, bogies 11 o'clock level, approximately 20 miles, large formation. The call came from one of the American Mustang groups flying ahead of the bomber stream. Harper strained his eyes in the indicated direction. At first, nothing. Then he caught it. Tiny specks against the clouds, growing larger. Many specks, dozens of them. Blue section, tally-ho! Enemy aircraft, 11 o'clock. Maintain formation until they commit. The German formation resolved into individual aircraft. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, distinguished by their angular lines and yellow engine cowlings. Harper counted at least 30, probably more. They were climbing, angling to attack the bomber formation from the left and ahead. Fortress Blue Leader, Kingfish Leader, you've got company coming in from your 11 o'clock. We're moving to intercept. Roger, Kingfish. Give 'em hell. Squadron Leader Thornton's voice came over the squadron frequency. All Kingfish flights prepare to engage. Attack on my mark. Remember, protect the bombers first. The German formation split. Half continued toward the bombers. The other half, 15 or 16 109s, turned to engage the Mustangs. They had altitude advantage, perhaps 2,000 feet. Here they come. Wright's voice was tight with tension. The leading 109s rolled into steep dives, building speed. Harper saw muzzle flashes. They were firing from extreme range, probably hoping to break up the Mustang formation. Tracer rounds arced past, bright in the thin air. Blue section, break right! Harper hauled his Mustang into a hard climbing turn. The G-forces pressed him into his seat. His vision grayed at the edges. A 109 flashed past, missing Wright by mere feet. Harper reversed his turn, trying to get on the German's tail, but the 109 pilot was good, already pulling into a vertical climb, using his momentum. Harper followed, advancing his throttle to full power. The Packard Merlin screamed, the airspeed building. The 109 was a dark cross against the sky, growing larger in his gun sight. 300 yards, 250, 200. Harper pressed the gun button. The Mustang shuddered as all 6 50 caliber guns erupted. The tracers arced out, converging, and passing behind the 109. Harper had misjudged the deflection. The German pilot snap-rolled and dove away. Harper tried to follow, but another 109 cut across his nose, firing. Harper felt impacts, metallic bangs against his fuselage. Alarm surged through him, but his instruments showed no damage. The rounds had hit non-critical areas. "Blue leader, you've got one on your 6!" Morrison's voice was high with stress. Harper threw the Mustang into a violent brake, pulling so hard his vision tunneled. Something flashed past his canopy. Cannon shells, yellow and bright. Too close. Far too close. He reversed again, using the Mustang's superior roll rate. The 109 trying to stay with him fell behind, unable to match the maneuver. Harper pulled vertical, trading speed for altitude, then pushed over into a split S. Now he was diving, airspeed building rapidly. 300 miles per hour, 350, 400, 420. The 109 was ahead and below, trying to dive away, but the Mustang was faster in the dive. Harper closed the range. 400 yards, 300, 250. He fired again. This time, the deflection was right. His tracers walked across the 109's left wing. Pieces flew off, fabric, metal. Smoke began streaming from the engine. The German pilot pulled up hard, trying to gain altitude for a bailout. Harper followed, firing short bursts. More hits sparked along the fuselage. Suddenly, the 109's canopy flew off. The pilot climbed out, fighting the slipstream, and tumbled clear. His parachute blossomed white against the winter landscape. Harper didn't watch him fall. He was already scanning for new threats. The sky was a chaos of swirling aircraft, tracer fire crisscrossing in deadly patterns. 2 aircraft fell, trailing smoke. One a 109, one a Mustang. Harper's gut clenched. Whose? He couldn't tell. "Blue 2, status?" he called. "Still here, Skip. Got a few holes, but she's flying." "Blue 3? "Aye, Blue 3's operational. That was close work." "Blue 4? Silence. "Blue 4, respond." Still nothing. Harper's blood ran cold. Morrison. Young Alex Morrison, 19 years old, barely 6 months operational. "Anyone have eyes on Blue 4? "Kingfish 8 here. I saw him go down northeast of the bombers. Looked like he got out, sir. Saw a chute." Relief flooded through Harper, followed immediately by guilt. Morrison was down in enemy territory. If he survived the landing, he'd spend the rest of the war in a prison camp. If he survived. But there was no time to dwell on it. The fight continued. More 109s were diving on the bombers now, attacking from above and ahead, the classic head-on pass that the Germans favored. The big fortresses shuddered under the impacts, their defensive guns creating a screen of fire. Harper led Blue Section back toward the bombers. A 109 was lining up for an attack, focusing on a B-17 trailing smoke from its number 3 engine. "Blue Section, follow me. We're taking that bogey." Harper pushed his throttle to the stops and dove. The Mustang accelerated like a stone, the airspeed indicator whining past 430 miles per hour. The 109 filled his gun sight. Harper led the target, accounting for deflection and relative motion, and fired. The 50 caliber rounds tore into the 109's cockpit and engine. The German fighter seemed to stagger in midair, then pitched over and began falling, trailing fire and debris. No parachute emerged. "Good shooting, Skip!" Reich called. But Harper felt no elation, only grim satisfaction. 2 kills didn't balance Morrison's loss. The air battle raged for another 15 minutes. Then the surviving German fighters broke off and dove away, low on fuel and ammunition. The sky cleared gradually, leaving only the steady drone of the bomber formation and the higher-pitched whine of the escorting Mustangs. Harper checked his fuel. Drop tanks empty, main tank showing 2/3 full. Plenty to reach home. He glanced at his watch. 09:45. They'd been over Germany for less than an hour. It felt like days. The bombers droned onward toward their target. The bomber formation continued eastward, a river of aluminum and determination cutting through the winter sky. Harper maintained his weaving patrol above and to the right of the lead combat wing, his eyes constantly scanning. The adrenaline from the first engagement was fading, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that he recognized from years of combat flying. At 1000 hours, the industrial sprawl of Oschersleben appeared on the horizon, marked by the distinctive smokestacks of the Focke-Wulf assembly plants. These factories produced the FW-190, one of Germany's most formidable fighters. Destroying them would deal a significant blow to the Luftwaffe's production capacity. Fortress Blue Leader, Kingfish Leader, we're approaching the initial point. Flak will be heavy. Roger, Kingfish, we see it. Good luck down there. The first black puffs of anti-aircraft fire blossomed ahead of the bomber formation, ugly flowers blooming at precisely 25,000 feet. The German flak gunners were experienced, their ranging accurate. The bombers flew straight and level now, locked into their bomb runs. No evasive action was possible. They had to hold course while the bombardiers lined up their targets in the Norden bomb sites. Harper watched, feeling helpless. Fighter pilots could dodge and weave, using speed and maneuverability to survive. Bomber crews had no such luxury. They flew through the flak storm with stoic courage that bordered on madness, trusting their armor and their luck. A B-17 in the lower left element took a direct hit. The entire aircraft seemed to disintegrate in a ball of orange fire. Harper counted 3 parachutes, maybe 4, out of a crew of 10. Another Fortress was hit in the number 2 engine, which immediately caught fire. The pilot feathered the propeller and activated the engine fire suppression system. The flames died, but the aircraft dropped out of formation, unable to maintain altitude on 3 engines. Kingfish Leader, this is Fortress Green 6. We're hit bad, losing altitude. We'll need escort back to friendly territory. Roger, Green 6. Kingfish 6 Flight, you're assigned. Stick with them. 4 Mustangs peeled off from the formation, taking station around the crippled bomber as it began a slow, descending turn toward the west. Harper knew their chances. Alone and damaged, the Fortress would attract German fighters like sharks to blood in the water. The Mustangs would do their best, but against determined opposition, he pushed the thought away and focused on his own responsibilities. The lead bombers reached their release point. Bomb bay doors swung open, and streams of 500-pound bombs tumbled earthward. The Fortresses lifted visibly as tons of ordnance fell away, their formations opening up as each aircraft completed its drop. Below, the bombs impacted across the factory complex. Even from 26,000 feet, Harper could see the flashes, the erupting clouds of smoke and debris. Secondary explosions followed, fuel stores or ammunition catching fire. A good strike. Intelligence would count this mission as successful. But the cost? Harper looked back at the scattered debris marking where the destroyed Fortress had been, at the struggling bomber limping westward, at the empty spaces in formations where other aircraft had gone down. How many crews lost? 20 men? 30? 50? Kingfish Flight, heads up. Bogies coming in from the east, high and fast. Harper snapped his attention forward. Another German formation was approaching. FW-190s this time, identified by their radial engines and distinctive silhouettes. Perhaps 20 aircraft, diving from 30,000 feet with altitude advantage. Blue section, prepare to engage. Stay together. The 190s split into pairs, attacking the bombers from multiple angles simultaneously. It was coordinated, professional, the work of experienced pilots. Harper selected the nearest pair, both diving toward a Fortress in the lead element. Blue 2, take the trailer. I've got the leader. Roger, Skip. Harper rolled inverted and pulled through, converting his altitude into speed. The Mustang responded beautifully, accelerating past 400 miles per hour. The leading 190 grew rapidly in his gun sight. The German pilot was focused on the bomber, not checking his 6 o'clock. A fatal mistake. Harper opened fire at 300 yards. The .50 caliber rounds converged on the 190's engine and cockpit. The radial engine exploded in a shower of metal and oil. The fighter nosed over and fell, trailing smoke and flame. "Splash 1190, Reich called. "Got the trailer." But more German fighters were pressing home their attacks. A fortress in the rear element shuddered as cannon shells tore through its fuselage. The tail gunner's position was hit directly, the entire section disintegrating. The bomber maintained formation, but Harper could see it was mortally wounded, streaming fuel and hydraulic fluid. A 190 flashed across Harper's nose, so close he instinctively flinched. He hauled the Mustang around, straining to follow, but the German pilot was already extending away, using superior speed. Donaldson's voice crackled over the radio. "Blue leader, I'm hit! Oil pressure dropping, engine temperature rising." Harper's heart sank. "Can you make it home?" "Negative, sir. I'll have to put her down. Making for friendly lines if I can." "Understood, Blue 3. Good luck, Peter." "Aye, sir. It's been an honor." Harper watched Donaldson's Mustang peel away from the formation, descending toward the west. White smoke streamed from the engine cowling. Harper knew the odds. Even if Donaldson reached Allied-held territory, landing a damaged aircraft was treacherous. And if the engine seized before he crossed the lines? The air battle continued with savage intensity. The German pilots were skilled and determined, pressing their attacks despite heavy losses. But the Mustangs had advantages: speed, altitude performance, and numbers. Gradually, the balance tipped. A 190 attempted a climbing attack and stalled out, vulnerable. Harper was there, firing a precise burst that sent the German fighters spinning toward the earth. His third kill of the mission, though, he took no satisfaction in it. At 10:20 hours, the surviving German fighters broke off, withdrawing to the east. The sky cleared again, leaving only the bombers and their escorts. The scattered parachutes of downed airmen, and the dark columns of smoke rising from Oschersleben far below. "All Kingfish flights, this is Kingfish Leader. Reform on the bombers. We're going home." The return journey was a test of endurance. Harper's fuel gauge showed less than half tanks remaining. Every minute took them farther from enemy territory, but also consumed precious fuel. He calculated constantly: distance to the coast, fuel consumption rate, reserve requirements. The mathematics were tight, uncomfortably tight. At 1100 hours, they crossed back into Dutch airspace. At 11:30, the North Sea appeared ahead, gray and unwelcoming. Harper had never been so glad to see water. "Blue section, fuel status?" "Blue 2, showing 1/4 tank." Wright's voice was steady, but Harper heard the underlying tension. 1/4 tank with 90 miles of water to cross and another 30 to reach Debden. They'd be landing on fumes. Harper checked his own gauge, slightly better than Wright's, but not by much. He reduced power to maximum range cruise setting, leaning the mixture as much as he dared. Every gallon mattered now. The English coast materialized through the haze at 1200 hours. Harper had never seen anything more beautiful than those white cliffs. He checked his fuel gauge one final time. The needle was touching the red line. Maybe 10 minutes of flying time remained, perhaps less. "Debden Tower, this is Kingfish Blue Leader. We're at 8,000 feet, 15 miles northeast. Request straight-in approach. We're low on fuel." "Roger, Kingfish Blue Leader. You're cleared for straight-in approach to runway 27. Wind is 270 at 10 knots. "Good to have you back, sir." Harper lined up on final approach from 5 miles out, too low on fuel to waste time with a proper circuit. The Mustang's engine coughed once, twice. The fuel pressure gauge flickered. Harper's hands tightened on the controls. "Come on, girl. Just a bit farther." The runway threshold passed beneath him. Harper cut power and flared, feeling the Mustang settle onto the concrete with a solid thump. He applied the brakes gently, rolled out, and turned onto the taxiway. The engine coughed again, and died. The propeller windmilled to a stop. Harper had landed with literally nothing remaining in the tanks. Ground crew swarmed around the aircraft as Harper climbed out on shaking legs. The mission had lasted 4 hours and 40 minutes, exactly as planned. But the reality of that time, the combat, the losses, the constant tension, had compressed into something that felt both longer and shorter than mere hours. Flight Sergeant Matthews appeared, his weathered face creased with concern. "You all right, sir? That was cutting it fine." "Fine as can be expected, Chief." Harper pulled off his flying helmet, feeling sweat-soaked hair plastered to his scalp. "How many made it back?" Matthews consulted his clipboard. 21 aircraft landed so far. 1 more reported inbound with damage. 2 confirmed losses, Morrison and Donaldson. Harper closed his eyes. He'd known, of course, but hearing it confirmed made it real. Morrison, captured or dead. Donaldson, who might have made it to friendly territory or might have gone down in the North Sea or occupied Holland. "Any word on Peter?" "Not yet, sir, but the Air-Sea Rescue Boys are searching." Harper nodded. There was nothing more he could do for his lost pilots now. He walked toward the debriefing room, his flight gear heavy on his shoulders. The debriefing lasted 2 hours. Intelligence officers recorded every detail. Enemy aircraft encountered, tactics observed, weapons effectiveness, navigation accuracy, fuel consumption. Harper answered mechanically, his mind replaying the mission in fragments. Finally released, he returned to his quarters and collapsed onto his bunk. He should sleep. Exhaustion pulled at him like a physical weight, but his mind wouldn't quiet. He kept seeing Morrison's Mustang falling, trailing smoke. Kept hearing Donaldson's calm Scottish voice saying, "It's been an honor." A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Squadron Leader Thornton entered without waiting for a response. "Harper, how are you holding up?" "I'm fine, sir." Thornton sat down in the room's single chair. "You're not fine. Nobody's fine after a mission like that. But you did well. Your section accounted for 5 confirmed kills, possibly 6. You protected the bombers. You brought your remaining pilots home." "I lost 2 men, sir." "You did. And you'll lose more before this war ends. That's the mathematics of aerial combat." Thornton's expression softened slightly. "But those Mustangs made a difference today. The Americans lost 17 heavy bombers, but without fighter escort, they would have lost 50 or 60. The Mustang proved itself. You proved it." Harper said nothing. The tactical success felt hollow against the personal losses. Thornton stood. "There's a message from Air-Sea Rescue. They picked up Flight Sergeant Donaldson from the Channel. He's alive, being treated for mild hypothermia, but he'll make a full recovery." Relief flooded through Harper so intensely it was almost painful. Thank God. Indeed. He put down in the water 5 miles off Dover, managed to get his dinghy inflated, and was spotted by a Spitfire doing coastal patrol. Lucky man. Thornton moved toward the door, then paused. "Get some rest, James. We fly again tomorrow." After Thornton left, Harper finally slept, falling into a deep, dreamless void. He woke at 1800 hours to find Major Caldwell sitting in the chair Thornton had occupied earlier. "Evening, Lieutenant. Sorry to disturb you." Harper sat up, rubbing his eyes. "What time is it?" 6 o'clock. You've been asleep for 4 hours." Caldwell leaned forward. "I wanted to talk to you about today's mission. Get your honest assessment, pilot to pilot." Harper considered the question carefully. "The Mustang performed as advertised. Better, actually. Range, speed, altitude capability, all exceeded expectations. In combat, she held her own against 109s and 190s. The heavy armament was effective. The aircraft is everything you claimed." But it's still war, Major. Men still die. Aircraft still fall. The Mustang gives us capabilities we didn't have before, and those capabilities will make a strategic difference. but it doesn't make the fighting easier or the losses more bearable. Caldwell nodded slowly. Fair assessment. The strategic picture is what matters, though. Today, your squadron and the American Mustang groups escorted bombers to a target 200 miles deep in Germany and brought most of them home. Last year, that mission would have been impossible. Next month, we'll reach Berlin. By summer, there won't be a target in Germany beyond our reach. That's what the Mustang does. It changes what's possible. And the cost? Will be high. War always is. But we're bringing the fight to Germany in ways they can't counter. Their industrial base, their oil refineries, their transportation networks, all vulnerable now. The Mustang doesn't end the war, but it gives us the tool to do so. Harper stood and walked to the window. Outside, ground crew were servicing the returned Mustangs, patching bullet holes, refueling, rearming. Tomorrow, they'd do it all again. You asked for my honest assessment, Harper said. Here it is. I don't believe in miracle weapons anymore. I've seen too many promises fail. But the Mustang is different. It's not a miracle. It's just damn good engineering matched to a specific requirement. And yes, it changes the strategic picture. Whether that's enough to win the war, I can't say. But it's more than we had before. That's all I needed to hear. Caldwell stood and extended his hand. Thank you for giving it a fair chance, Lieutenant. A lot of British pilots wouldn't have. They shook hands and Caldwell departed. Harper remained at the window as evening settled over the airfield. The Mustangs sat in their dispersals, silver birds with new capabilities and old purpose. Somewhere over Germany, Morrison was either in a prison camp or dead. Donaldson was in a hospital bed, alive but no longer operational. 2 more names added to the endless list of casualties. But tomorrow, the bombers would fly again, and the Mustangs would escort them, reaching farther into enemy territory than had ever been possible before. The war was changing. The wings that made it possible were American, but the price was paid in British blood as well as American. Harper turned away from the window and began preparing his equipment for the next mission. There would always be a next mission, until the war ended or he didn't come back from one. That was the only certainty. The end.